I just did a Google search for colorful collage, and I came across a lady who was holding a workshop in Squim in the fall, and I said, I got to take this class. This is really cool.
Hey Islanders, and welcome to episode 148 of the Camano Voice. Today I speak with the featured cover artist on the Camano Studio Art Guide for 2022 and a local Camano artist. Please welcome Tasha Smith. Hi, I'm Brandon Erickson, and you're listening to the Camano Voice podcast, where I interview local business owners, comedians, singers, and more. I dive into their backstory to find out how they got where they are, what are some of the tips for you to do the same, and find out where they are going. Tune in every week as I interview more of the people you see every day. Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice, where we release a new episode every Tuesday. And hope you guys had a nice week off. I did not post last week because I was on a camping trip. Funny story though, I'm recording this before it, so you guys do get this this coming week. So I haven't actually gone on the camping trip, but I could pretend I did. That was wonderful. We had a great time, and good time to spend with the family. Great conversation, good food, all that stuff. Okay, back to present, Brandon. Hope you guys' week is going well. So I got to interview Tasha Smith, who, as I said in the intro, was the featured artist on the Camano Studio Art Tour guide for 2022. So, of course, we've got lots of artists that are on the Camano Studio Art Tour, and there's just so many great artists on the island and San Juan Camano area. But I thought that was she had applied to be on the tour one year. I believe it was in 2019 or 2020. You'll hear that in the podcast. But and she didn't make it, and so kind of went back, honed her craft more, and then came back again. But also became the featured artist on that. So I thought that was a really cool story. I thought that was neat that she was able to do that. And she has such a unique style of art. I probably say that a lot when it comes to art because it's all unique, but she uses like a painted collage style, so it's different than most, pretty much any other thing that you're going to look at on that. And she does a lot of art that's inspired by the Pacific Northwest, which she grew up in. She loves hikes, and so a lot of her art reflects some of that natural beauty. So had a great time talking with her, was able to connect with her and get her on the podcast. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Tasha Smith. Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice. Today I'm here with a Camano artist, and she was also the featured artist on the Camano Studio Art Tour Guide for 2022. Welcome to the podcast, Tasha Smith.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, excited to have you. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about Tasha.
Okay, well, I've been living on Camano Island since 2018.
Okay.
We moved here, as you've said a few times to me, that everyone moves here for a reason. And we moved here because I was previously homeschooling my 3 daughters, and we decided to put them in public school, so we were looking for a good school district.
Okay.
And originally considering Stanwood, but Camano kept calling us. And little did I know that Camano was also a thriving art community, so that all worked out well for me.
Nice. Very cool. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Salem, Oregon.
Okay. What was that like growing up there for you?
I'd say pretty standard Pacific Northwest life. Pretty much just stayed in Salem all the way through high school.
Okay.
And graduated and went to school at University of Idaho.
Okay.
For architecture.
Okay.
And the University of Idaho had a little bit more of an artistic architecture program. So I actually ended up switching my major over to fine art in the process of that. And I didn't end up staying in the art school just because I thought I'm going to graduate at 20, 22 and have a fine art degree and be broke. So
Okay.
I switched my major to business.
Okay.
So I actually have a bachelor's of science in business from Oregon State,
Okay.
and I ended up with a minor in fine art.
Okay. Very cool. So growing up then, were you like in throughout high school and stuff, was art something that you were like really took to like during classes and stuff like that?
I went to elementary school at a private school,
Okay.
and I think the arts were very much supported there. We had parents and volunteers who would come in and teach everything from calligraphy to producing a small play.
Okay.
So I definitely had a good amount of, exposure to creative classes, and I enjoyed art. I wouldn't necessarily say that I spent a lot of time creating art or focusing on it. And even through high school, I didn't take a single art class.
Really? Okay.
So, yeah, I don't have a huge background early on in art.
Yeah, it's so interesting because some people, I've interviewed quite a few artists, and sometimes they're like, yeah, like right out the gate, like I was always really into art, and I was doing these things, and I just poured all my time into that. But it's just fascinating to me that people can kind of take it, some people, and then some people like they didn't really get into art until they retired.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
you just get this whole spectrum of artists.
It seems like there's a lot of people on the island or Stanwood that say that they had a whole other career and then, later on they retired and then became a professional artist. So, yeah.
Very cool. So, what had led you to go to the U of A for architecture then? Architecture.
In high school, I took all the drafting classes. So
Okay.
I had drafting and design, and I really liked my drafting teacher. So,
Okay.
and I've always been intrigued by architecture and found it very interesting. So, I still do. I just found it to be a little tough as far as the school. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I went to the sister university of that. I went to Wazoo.
Oh, okay, Wazoo.
So it was always funny because we would, when a lot of our grocery shopping stuff, we would go over in Moscow.
Yeah, right.
And do the shopping there. So we pass that all the time. So it's always, I'm always like, we kind of went there, not really, but kind of.
Yeah, right.
So I love Moscow though. Like such a great little town.
Yeah. Great town.
So it actually feels very much like Mount Vernon, like in the Skagit.
Definitely farm community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, awesome. So then when you switched from architecture to fine art, especially since you hadn't really had a whole lot of, you had art exposure, but hadn't been something you'd really focus on in high school. What kind of made you think that, or what made you kind of make that switch then?
From architecture to art.
Yeah.
I realized how much I was enjoying the art classes because the architecture program had art classes built into the curriculum. So
Okay.
I was already taking some of the art classes there, and it was great. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But then the more art classes I took, the more I thought, I don't really see myself doing that or knowing how to launch myself as a fine artist at that age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So during those art classes then, was there a certain either type of art or style of art that really drew your attention?
Not particularly. I wouldn't say that background necessarily gave me a great deal of focus for where I am now.
Okay.
I think more so just developing as a person and having all the experiences I've had from then until now has been more of a guiding force than that original exposure to art.
Okay. Nice. So then you mentioned like, your thought process of kind of going through, graduating at 20 or 21 and then realizing, wait, I'm going to have an art degree. Like, how am I going to jump into, get a job right away? Did you have business background, like in your family or anything like that?
Not really. My dad worked for himself, and my grandparents kind of did their own thing and had their own businesses. And so I would say I came from an environment where work ethic was very important, but nothing specific as far as small business.
Okay. Nice. So then when you switched over to business, what was that like for you? Because that's a pretty big change from going from fine art into business. What was that like as you started doing those classes and stuff?
I really enjoyed the business classes. In there, I also took a year off of school. So basically when I finished up with art at University of Idaho, then I took a year off. I was kind of broke. I didn't really have a lot of focus.
Yeah.
So I dropped out of school for a year, worked at Walmart, just did nothing. And then I was like, this is ridiculous. Let's get something going here. So I moved back to Oregon and started back in the College of Business at Oregon State University. And that's when I really got serious about finishing my degree. So,
okay.
And those classes were awesome. I really enjoyed them, and especially the marketing department. One particular class was service marketing, and it was really diving deep into relationships and relationship building, and how a business like Les Schwab or something like real estate or something like running your own fine art business would be something that requires a lot of relationship building and relationship skills in order to maintain your customer base.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. So then, as you were finishing up your degree there, what was your kind of plan looking forward then?
I'm not sure I had a plan. But back to the whole 20-year-old know nothing, don't know what I'm doing deal. I'd say didn't have a lot of experience in working with people or feeling comfortable with things like job interviews or speaking in front of people. So I guess I just thought at the time that if I graduated with a degree in business that I'd get a job, and that would be all I would need was that diploma to go get a job. So yeah, if I was to give a high school kid advice, I'd say it's definitely more than just the degree. You've got to have the full picture and develop a plan for what you really want to be doing.
Yeah. So what did you end up doing then? What kind of played out after you graduated?
After I graduated, I worked a number of different jobs. I worked at a bank, and then I worked in the marketing department at a retirement community selling retirement apartments.
Okay.
Then I had a few different jobs. Nothing was really super exciting. Then 9/11 happened, and my husband was deployed to Iraq, so that shifted things for me definitely in there too.
Yeah. What was that like for you guys then?
It was okay. He was gone for a year, so I actually just didn't work, and I started making art.
Okay.
So that was something that I guess relied on during that time to get me through. And so when I speak of it, it's what I would consider BK, and it means before kids. I did, they were actually fabric collage. And so it was pieces of fabric glued onto a piece of cotton, and then I would quilt the whole thing. So it was an art quilt.
Okay.
And I did that for a few years, and then my husband came back, and he decided to become a pilot or an aviator and get his degree in aeronautics. So we moved to North Dakota. So and in there, I also became pregnant and started my life as a mom. So that's where I've been for the last 15 years.
So when you started doing the quilting and stuff, were you starting to sell those, or were you just making them for yourself?
I didn't do a whole lot with it. I did a couple shows, and I don't think I sold anything. It just was something that I enjoyed doing. It was going well. The drawback was there's not a huge market for, or at least I didn't think at the time there was a huge market for fiber arts, and as far as how to display them, because they're fabric, it makes it a little bit trickier. So I didn't really see that there was a big market for it. And then I've always been interested in collage, so I have always had it in the back of my mind that I wanted to think about collage, but I didn't discover the medium that I'm working on now until 2017. And so at that point was basically where the transition happened, that I was homeschooling my kids, and I just really got burnt out with it. I had been doing it for 4 or 5 years, and my oldest is, a typical oldest child, and we were just ready to be moving on to something else. So we were living in Marysville, and we decided to move to get a better school district. So that's when we moved to Camano.
Homeschooling is not for the faint of heart. It is and like, it's funny because during that time period, you're homeschooling people, like, oh, so you're just teaching your kids at home, like, and then we have the pandemic and everyone had to homeschool, and the amount of like professional moms that like in the business world are like on top of it, all of a sudden had to homeschool at home, and had a whole new level of respect for all of the stay-at-home moms out there.
That's for sure true.
So totally get that. So so then you guys were looking around. What was it that you guys heard of as far as like about the school systems in this area?
We were thinking Arlington or Stanwood, because we were just down in Marysville. We just heard that both Arlington and Stanwood had a good district. So we were looking in Stanwood, but Camano kept calling us out. So that's what worked out for us.
Nice. Very cool. So how did you get introduced to the style of art that you're doing currently then? You said in 2017 is when you kind of got started on that. How did that come about?
I just did a Google search for colorful collage, and I came across a lady who was holding a workshop in Squim in the fall, and I said, I got to take this class. This is really cool. So I basically learned her process, and then have just grown with it and modified it a little bit, but plugged it into what I'm doing. And I'd say that I use a lot of natural elements in the work that I do. My work is primarily inspired by nature. So I'm a Pacific Northwest kid, and have been backpacking and hiking and camping since I could walk, but carrying my own pack since I was 5. So
nice.
Just always kind of the person who's taking a closer look and really inspired by the natural world and allowing it to, just taking the time to look closely and allowing that to inspire the artwork that I do.
So, so for the listeners and stuff, What style of painting do you use?
So I suppose it's probably easier just to do a quick walkthrough of the process.
Yeah.
The it's it's not an actual painting, it's a paper painting, and I start by painting an acrylic painting on a panel, and then the second part of the process is that I make my own paper, which means I basically print paper and saturate it with acrylics so that it's completely colored. And then I take the paper and rip it up and apply it like a brush stroke to the piece.
Mm-hmm.
So I use a gel medium to apply it. It's a thick glue, and then I just keep working it up until I'm satisfied with the end result.
Yeah. So how does the acrylic and the paper interact when you're soaking it?
It just makes the paper so that it will last for decades.
Okay.
And that was one thing that I had always thought about collage, was that it's kind of boring and gray and magazine clippings and all that.
Yeah.
So now that I've found this process, which means that you can have the vibrancy of a painting, but then you've added the texture from the printing process.
Yeah.
So
Very cool.
Yeah.
And so, have you played around with trying it with like watercolor or oil painting, and have you ever played around with that to see what it does to the paper?
the trouble with oil is that it takes a long time to dry.
Okay.
And I'm not sure. I suppose you could probably use watercolor. I doubt if it would work on the silicone printing plate.
Oh, okay.
You can use alcohol ink on that, so that's part of the process, is that I use a silicone printing plate, and acrylics seems to work well on there.
Okay.
So yeah.
Nice. And had you ever seen anyone doing this with paper before, like soaking it in acrylic paint?
No, not before this course that I took. Yeah.
Very cool.
It's a fairly unique process.
Yeah. So you guys move over here. You finally get your kids into school. Then, what kind of happens next?
Well, what happens next is a pandemic hits, and then I've always said I'm mom first, so I did the right thing for my kids, and I pulled them out of school. Kind of school ended anyways, right about the time. I pulled them out like right before they sent everybody home.
Yeah.
And then I just pulled them out, and we homeschooled for the rest of 2020.
Okay.
And then we all tried to go back and do remote in the fall, but my middle daughter's dyslexic, and my youngest was in second grade, and so they weren't really loving the remote work. My oldest did fine. So I pulled them back out of school, and we homeschooled for the rest of that year, which would have been 2020, 2021.
Yeah.
So, and as far as the art career, I had just kind of decided, first of all, I didn't have a lot of time because I was homeschooling, and second, what's the point of trying to enter shows during a pandemic?
Right.
Because it's hard as it is, and then traffic's probably down, and it just didn't seem like it was a very worthwhile thing to try to do. So I primarily devoted my time to just being in the studio.
Okay.
And my kids are old enough that I was able to just say, I'm going to be in the studio for 2 or 3 hours a day. And I think that's really worked out for me, because it meant that the quality of my work improved quite a bit in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So it's been fun to see how I've grown artistically, and then be able to have this big launch with the studio tour.
Yeah.
People came to my home and they were like, wow, what have you done before this? And I said, well, nothing. There was a pandemic. I've been homeschooling my kids. They're like, well, how long have you been doing this? Well, just a few years, really. This is like my first launch. And they are like, oh, wow, this is your first, really, my first major thing.
Yeah.
I've been in a few other galleries, so.
Very cool. So, as you were like, you're starting to learn this stuff, and you had that one class. Has everything else that you kind of been learning? Are there other mentors or stuff along the way that do this type of art, or is really that first class really the only people that you really found that do it?
Yeah, I get quite a few questions about my background and my time in art school and primarily, I guess, the process itself is what I needed to know. Everything else is just practice and experimenting and playing and staying open and growing.
Yeah.
And I don't know. That's pretty much it. Making sure I have a good composition and I'm learning as I go. I guess that's primarily what it is just getting in the studio and working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you feel? Because this is one of those. A lot of times you'll have, even within a business or whatever it is, you have certain strengths that you're good at, and then there's things that you're weak at. How do you feel like the business degree kind of helped you along that as well?
I've told several people that I feel like every aspect of my life has all been leading up to this.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems strange to say, but it does feel true. It is a business, and it's something that you have to dedicate time and energy to, because you can't just sit in a studio and make art all day. You have to be out there and finding ways to show your work and continue to promote yourself in the community. So all the business side's been a great help there. I have learned how to do a lot of things as well. Write press releases and update my website and do all sorts of digital things that I didn't really want to do, but I learned.
Yeah.
I'm more of an analog person, but I'm slowly growing, and I'm definitely feeling like my business skills are improving all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How was that for you? Because one of the things I think with art that's so, for artists is so interesting is that, like when it comes to, if you're a product-based business, you're creating a product or you're getting a product and you're selling that. And for that, like, if someone insults it or something's like, well, like for us, like we've got a bakery. If someone's like, well, I really don't like this croissant or this cookie or whatever, it's like, okay, fine, it's not your cup of tea, that's fine. But like when it's your art, it's a different level because in order for art to be great, you have to pour yourself into that. How was that for you, being very new at all of this, getting yourself out there, marketing yourself? How did you kind of get past all of those barriers?
Well, this kind of goes back to being 20 and not feeling like I was set up to be launching as a fine artist. I think at 20, I didn't have confidence or thick enough skin to be in the art world. Mm-hmm. Now that I always say to my kids, well, I'm halfway to dead, so now's the time to do whatever, at my age, I can take it. I can take any criticism, though I haven't really received any, so that's great.
Yeah.
I've had nothing but really great feedback and support.
Yeah.
So.
Nice.
Yeah.
So then you've, when did you first link up with the Camano Art Group? I forget its name.
Camano Arts Association.
That one. Yes. When did you first get connected with them?
Yeah, let's think about that. I believe 2019, spring of 2019.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I actually juried for the 2020 tour, and I did not make it into the 2020 tour, and I was really disappointed in the fall, but by the time the pandemic hit, I was like, well, dodged a bullet there.
Yeah.
So I didn't even bother jurying for the 2021 tour
Okay.
because I already knew I was going to have kids home and I didn't know what it would all look like. So
Yeah.
I skipped over that.
Okay.
And like I said, I put my focus into being in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
So then this last fall, I decided to jury since the kids were back in school this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So then, when you're going back to that, sometimes you can get that feeling of just like, well, I've tried this already and it didn't work before. What were kind of your feelings when you were like, okay, I'm going to try this again? It's been a couple of years. You've grown a lot, but what did you feel like when that?
I was surprised I didn't make it the first time.
Okay.
But I felt confident in my ability to be juried in, and I had a different collection of work to show, so I felt good about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. So then, tell us about how did you end up becoming the featured artist on this Camano Studio Art Guide?
Every year they ask for submissions to be on the cover, so I submitted 3 pieces, and they chose and gave me a call, and Mary Simmons called and said, well, you've been selected for the cover. And I said, oh, nice. And I said, so who else is going to be on the cover? And she says, nobody, just you. And I was like, what?
Wow. What was that like for you?
Yeah, that was a great feeling. And she called me at Christmas time, so I said that was my Christmas gift.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So then as you're getting prepped and everything, how did this studio art tour go for you? Finally getting to be on it and being part of it.
Yeah. Well, the first day I was completely exhausted. Just a lot of energy going into talking with people and being on my feet all day. I think after being through the pandemic, we're just all maybe not quite used to being out there talking to everybody all the time.
Yep.
But the big takeaway was just the extremely positive feedback that I received from people. People were just coming in and, I was getting, wow, and oh my gosh, this is so happy, and what beautiful colors, and all these comments. And even this one group of ladies were so caught up in taking in my gallery of work that they couldn't hear me talking to them. Like I was standing behind them trying to say something, and they were like, oh, Pam, did you look at that? Wow. Yeah. So that was it. Like I almost teared up because I was just so blown away by the reception from the people who come on the tour. And it just made me realize how the Camano Arts Association has really ended up with a group of people who are just super loyal fans of the arts, and what a great thing that is, and how wonderful to have a group of people who appreciate the arts as much as they do.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, congratulations. That's a huge achievement to be able to, of how many studios that are on the tour, and to be able to do that, especially in such a short time.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, what are other things that you would like the audience to know when it comes to arts and stuff like that?
Well, I guess a couple of things that I'd mention is that that art is a business, and that people should appreciate the fact that if an artist is working, they're trying to also run a small business. Mm-hmm. And so when you're supporting an artist, remember that you're supporting that business. And so it's like any other small business in this area, where the person's just trying to continue to do the things that they love to do. And so when you can support them and share their work and purchase their work, then that just goes to support that small business.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And then another thing that I'd like to just throw out there is that I'm trying to kind of shift the concept that the arts are a tricky thing to try to make it in, and that that you don't have to be a starving artist and work for decades to break into the scene.
Yeah.
That the arts is that you can make your own way in the arts, and it takes focus, hard work, determination, creativity, but that you shouldn't rely on being discovered or a gallery finding you or any of those things. That this is actually a business that you're running, and so it takes skills and community and support to bring that all together. So it is a great place to run a small business on Camano, and especially an art business. It's an outstanding place to be doing that. It's a very supportive community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is, I think that, it's remarkable what you've accomplished in such a short amount of time when it comes to the arts. And, you mentioned some stuff along the way that I wanted to pull out of is you mentioned that as your kids were homeschooling home, you took your time and said, I'm going to go spend a few hours in the studio. And you did that day in and day out. And during that time period, you just were getting better and honing your arts. Instead of sitting there on the couch and watching Netflix or doing whatever other people do, it always comes back to you have to put in the work to get to the result that you want to get to.
Yeah.
It doesn't just happen overnight. It doesn't happen because you had a one win. For the 1 in a billion people that there's a windfall and they just happen to be in the right place at the right time. Most of the other people were working really hard to get to that one point and happened to be there because they had worked so hard to get to that point that they got discovered.
Right. And
so
I'll post things on Facebook like, hey, I've got flags up in Stanwood, or I'm on the cover, or whatever types of things are happening for my small business. And people say, wow, what luck. And I kind of laugh because it's like, well, it was lucky that they chose me, I guess, except that I've worked hard to produce the art that I've made, and I made a point of being diligent to work on the business side and apply for different things. And I do spend a couple hours every day just working on the business side of this business. So that's how I start my mornings. Just working on the business side. So, yeah.
No, I think that's very important for people to see that and realize that. It's like whenever people are like, well, it was an overnight success. Like, yeah, except for the 7 years leading up to the overnight success. But yes.
Exactly, right, yeah.
So, very cool. So, you've kind of established this art form that is very unique and stuff. Are there other types that you're looking into that you're kind of wanting to pursue as well?
There is nothing else I want to pursue other than I'll continue to produce new collections with a little bit of a different slant. I suspect that everyone can expect to see a lot more florals from me. It will continue to be collage. I've had people ask, well, I don't get it. Your paintings are really cool. What's wrong with just leaving this as a painting? But when you love every aspect of producing the work, and it makes it more unique and more of a story and more texture and more detail, then why not do it, right? So then I guess the other thing I could throw in there is that I could see sometime down the road working on abstract work as well. So I'll probably not give up on any florals, and I don't think I'll necessarily give up on the landscapes, but I might add in abstract work.
Yeah, very cool. So when it comes to like either other artists or people that you follow, is there anyone else out there at this point that you kind of look to, whether you're like looking for inspiration or looking for where to continue to grow in?
I think as far as work and art, there's a lot of artists that I really love their work. There's another artist in McMinnville, Oregon. named Erin Hansen, and I follow her work more so. Well, her art is gorgeous, but she also clearly knows how to run a business because she's highly successful and has 2 galleries and all sorts of stuff going on. And
Yeah.
I look back at her history and I don't see a lot of gallery exposure or the traditional way of necessarily doing things. So I think that from that and just from experience, I would say that I'll continue to do things my way and, run it like a business, knowing what I think is going to work best for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. Well, I like to end every podcast with some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
So the first one is, what purchase of $100 or less have you enjoyed the most in the last 3 months?
My family bought me a peony bush for
Okay.
Mother's Day. So I'm
Very
looking
cool.
forward to seeing how that looks and how big it gets in my yard.
Nice. All right. Who is the most influential person outside of your family in your life?
Off the top of my head, I think like somebody like Oprah Winfrey, just because of her positivity and the way she's influenced a whole generation of people to just be mindful and positive and never stop growing.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. This is a fill in the blank question.
Okay.
I know this is weird, but I've always wanted to blank.
Well, my husband and I were just talking about this the other day, and he wants to do all these crazy things like sail across the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
I'm a little more of a land lover, and I really don't have any desire to do some of the things that he maybe wants to do.
Yeah.
I think mine will just be to continue to do every day what I really love to do and be in nature and produce art.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing really crazy other than travel more, but
Yeah.
that's pretty standard.
Yeah. All right. Who's an interesting or fascinating person that I should interview next?
Have you interviewed Val Paul Taylor?
No.
He's got so many great stories.
Awesome.
Yeah, he's kind of my art father. It's like the godfather of
Yes.
art for me, like my art father. So.
Okay. Very cool. All right. And lastly, what piece of advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
I guess to lighten up and go easier on myself. Stop judging myself or giving myself a hard time for everything,
Yeah.
which is probably still something I could give myself for advice.
Very cool. So I'll put links to this in the show notes, but where can people find you?
People can find me on Facebook and Instagram, and also my website, TashaSmithArt.com.
All right. Awesome. And like I said, we'll have links for all of that in the show notes. So be
Great.
sure to follow her on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you so much for joining me on the
Yeah.
podcast today.
Great. Thanks so much for having me, Brandon.
All right. And Islanders, I will talk to you on the next one. Well, a big thank you to Tasha Smith for joining me on the podcast today, and thank you for listening. If you aren't already, be sure to follow me on Instagram at the Camano Voice as I continue to try and remember to post on this. I'm trying to do better. But for more information on this episode, you can go to CamanoCommons.com/podcast. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.